there, welcome back to my kitchen. Have you ever seen anything as beautiful as these plums? They're gorgeous. They're purple and blue and light blue and dark blue and red. So I thought today we'd put these plums to good use by making a delicious plum tart. And it's a German style tart with a crust on the bottom and then a frangipane layer. Frangipane is just an almond paste, and if you watched my video a couple of months ago on a rhubarb galette, that had a similar frangipane filling, so it's just made with almond flour, butter, eggs, sugar. It makes the most delicious, nutty, creamy, glorious filling. And so we're going to do that same sort of technique today. And so it'll be a layer of crust, a layer of frangipane filling, and then a layer of these gorgeous plums and a sprinkling of sugar and some toasted almonds, and it's going to come together in the most delicious way. So the first thing we're going to do is work on these plums. You'll need about 3 cups of plums for this, give or take. Essentially, these are going to be pitted and sliced and arranged on the top of a round 10-inch springform pan. So I'm just going to cut this away from the pits. And everyone seems to have their own favorite way of doing this. Sometimes it takes you a couple and you mangle a couple before you get into a groove. And if they don't come away exactly cleanly, don't worry about it, because we can hide those ones. This is all going to be covered with a scattering of slivered almonds too, so again, it will all look beautiful in the end. Slivered almonds and powdered sugar, I find, cover a multitude of sins. So I'm going pole to pole all around this pit in one direction, and then I'm doing it in another direction. So I've got 4 segments, and then I use my knife to tease that away from the pit. And some of them are going to come away easier than others. This one's a little stuck to that pit, but just sort of tease it out of there as best you can. I'll try another one. So there's your little stem end. Put your knife in, bring it right down to the pit, and go all around. Then turn it in another direction. Put your knife in, go down to the pit, and go all around that pit. And there, this one's behaving a little better for me. And if you mangle a few, don't worry about it. So we're going for about 3 cups of fruit. That looks like maybe 2.5 cups. Does this happen to you? You buy a brand new measuring cup and after 2 or 3 trips in the dishwasher, it loses all its lines? I don't know why that happens. Anyway, this is a 4-cup measuring cup, and I'm sort of guesstimating the 3-cup line. And I'm sure many of you share my frustration. Manufacturers, please put paint on that does not get taken off in the dishwasher. I think 1 more is going to do it. And then I'll have the rest of these for nibbling on later. There. I'm going to call that 3 cups. And if I need more, I've got a few more left here in the bowl. So we prepared the plums, and I'm all set up here to put the crust layer together. But the other thing I have to do to the plums is to add a tablespoon of cornstarch. And that will help to soak up any juices that may accumulate while the plums are baking, so we don't end up with a soggy bottom. We don't want soggy bottoms in our tart. My oven is preheating to 375, and now we can put together the ingredients for the crust. So I have 3/4 of a cup of butter that I've cut into cubes, and it's been sitting out getting to room temperature. So I'll put that in our mixer, in our mixing bowl. And I have half a cup of sugar, just plain white granulated sugar. And I'm just going to let that cream together for a few minutes. So there, that's nicely creamed together. Just scrape down the sides of your bowl a little bit. And now I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And that may have been a little bit more than a teaspoon. I tend to measure with my heart when it comes to vanilla. And I have 2 eggs. Just crack those and mix those in one at a time. You want to get this butter, sugar, and egg mixture very nice and fluffy. Scrape down your bowl again. Add your second egg and give that another beat. Now I have 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to just mix that in with the flour. I tend not to use a whole lot of salt in my baking because I use salted butter. Unsalted butter I know is preferred by pastry chefs, but salted butter is readily available and it's the cheapest right now. So I have 2 cups of flour. And I just added 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And you don't have to worry about writing down all of these ingredients. I always put my recipe in the description, so you can just follow along and then use the recipe that's in the description. So just mix that together. And stop once and just scrape down your blade and the sides. This tart crust is a press-in crust, so it's not like a tart crust that you would roll out like traditional pastry. So once it comes together into a nice stiff dough, we're going to press it into our springform pan. So just give that another quick mix. There, that looks pretty good. So we'll scrape that off the blade. We're going to be using the same bowl and blade to make our frangipane filling. So it doesn't have to be completely clean. You don't have to put this in the dishpan and wash it. This is the consistency we have. Very stiff, smooth, paste-like dough for our crust. So now we're going to go ahead and press that into our springform pan. Oh, there's my oven. So I have a 10-inch springform pan, same sort of thing you would use to make a cheesecake. And I have a tablespoon of softened butter. And I'm just going to spread that around in the pan using my fingers. You can use a little piece of plastic wrap or wax paper if you like. Spread it all over the bottom and get it all around the sides of the pan as well. Don't want anything to stick. You could also use baking spray, and I should also mention that in this recipe you can make it entirely vegan by using plant-based butter. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, go ahead and use plant-based butter. I do that all the time and everything works out perfectly. So now we have our pan nicely prepared and all greased, so we can just transfer this dough mixture into the pan. Get every last bit of that buttery goodness. Spread it out as best you can. The other thing that helps is to just use your fingers, but make sure your fingers are wet. So I'm just going to get a little dish of water. So I'm just going to wet my fingers and press this. Press this down. And make sure to get it into the edges and up the sides of the pan a little bit, about halfway up. And if your fingers start to stick, just wet them a little bit more. And use your hand to sort of ascertain whether that crust layer is nice and even. You can use a drinking glass that has a smooth bottom. Just rub a little bit of water and just sort of use that to glide around. It doesn't have to be perfect. One thing that you do want to be careful of is to make sure that in those edges that where the springform wall of the pan meets the base, you want to make sure you press that well with your thumb so that you don't end up with this big wad of crust in the corners, and try to even out the tops of those crust walls so they're not so jaggedy. And you can use a spatula to help you with that too. Just sort of press so it's nice and even. A little fiddly, but not as fiddly as rolling out pastry. So this is going to go in the oven for about 15 minutes. And I'm just going to prick it all over with the tines of a fork. As it bakes, it's probably going to puff up. So midway through the baking, just take it out of the oven and give it another poke with a fork in any areas that have puffed up. That'll release some of the air bubbles. That will happen, and I will show you how I take care of that. So let's put this into the oven to bake for about 15 minutes. And this is a very buttery press-in crust, so I'm putting it on a pizza pan just to catch any drips of butter that may leak out. So we're about at the 10-minute mark, and I notice the crust is puffing up a little bit, so I'm just going to take this out of the oven briefly and show you how I'm going to take care of that. So just gently, in this poofy part, just hit that again with the tines of your fork and release the air. You may have to press down on it ever so slightly. And I do the same with the sides. Just press that crust with the back of a nice big spoon. Again, this is a different type of tart crust, a press-in tart crust that's more like shortbread than pie crust, and it's going to be fantastic. And you can see how a little bit of that butter has seeped out of the springform pan, so you definitely want to bake this on a baking sheet or a pizza pan just to keep everything in place. We'll let that bake for its final 5 minutes, and then we'll take it out of the oven to rest for a little bit, and we'll work on our frangipane filling. Okay, the final 5 minutes is up, so let's check on our tart, and this is what you're looking for. A nice golden around the edges, but not quite golden on the top of the crust. It's poofed up a little bit. That will settle down. Just going to poke that again with my fork, and we can set this to one side and work on our frangipane filling. Don't turn your oven off, but turn it back down to 350 Fahrenheit. So we'll just put this over here. Our frangipane filling starts off much the same as the crust did, with a little bit of sugar and butter. So we're going to use the same bowl that we used to mix the crust with, and the same blade, so no need to be washing things. I have a half a cup of granulated sugar and about a generous 2 tablespoons of butter. And again, I will have the ingredient list in the description and all the instructions, so you can follow along with me, and then when you want to make the recipe, all the measurements are there. And if you're more comfortable measuring in weights, I also add the gram measurements too. So I'm just going to beat together this butter and sugar. And I have a teaspoon of almond extract and 2 eggs. So just add those in and beat that up until it's nice and fluffy. Scrape down the sides of your bowl just to make sure there isn't any of that butter-sugar mixture stuck to the bottom. And oh, that almond extract smells divine. And it's really going to amp up the almond flavor of our ground almonds. So I have 1.5 cups of ground almonds or almond flour, depending on what part of the world you're in. Here in Canada, it's sold as almond flour, but it's basically just finely ground almonds. It's pretty widely available now. Give that a good mix. There, it's nice and fluffy and smooth. And now we're going to spread this frangipane mixture on top of our crust. So here we have our par-baked crust for our tart, and we have our frangipane filling here in the bowl. So I'm just going to spread the frangipane over the crust mixture. So just spread that out over the crust, right up to the edge. And now we're going to arrange our plums over the top. So I've had our plums sitting here soaking up that cornstarch. And we're just going to make a nice little design over the top of the frangipane. So I like concentric circles. Just take your time. And there's no right way or wrong way to do this. Don't worry about that cornstarch coating on your plums. That's all going to get juicy and beautiful, and the cornstarch will disappear, melt into the tart. And the little pieces that got kind of mushed in the pitting process, you don't have to worry about them because we're going to put some nice almonds over the top of everything, and that's going to hide anything that isn't exactly photogenic. So just keep arranging them as attractively as you can. It's all going to bake up beautifully. That was about 3 cups of sliced plums. And we're going to tuck you. I'll put you in right here. Now that the plums have all been arranged, we'll put on a little sprinkling of sugar. So this is just 1/4 cup of white granulated sugar. I'm just going to sprinkle that over everything. And now for the next topping, we have some almonds. And I have about 1/4 cup of sliced almonds. You don't need very many, just a few for the top, just to give it a nice little bit of decoration and crunch. And now we've had the oven still on, and it's at 350. And I'm going to put this tart back on this pizza pan, just in case the plums are juicy. And we're going to bake this for 20 to 25 minutes. And I think I'm going to check it at the 20-minute mark to make sure the filling is set. So into the oven, and now we wait. So it's been about 20 minutes, and let's see how this filling is setting up. I wish you could smell this. It smells amazing, and the plums are getting nice and juicy. I'm just going to stick a knife in between the plums and see if that filling is setting up. It seems pretty liquidy still. I'm thinking this can go for another 10 minutes. You don't want it to be completely set like a cooked cake batter, but you do want it to be not runny. So I think because the plums are quite juicy, let's give this another 10 minutes in the oven and see how it makes out. Let's try this again. Now I think we're ready. So I've lost track of how long that was in the oven in total for. I think about 30 minutes. Just give it another little poke. The plums are very juicy, and there's still some filling sticking to the knife when I insert it into the filling between the plums, but I don't want to dry out the crust. This is going to set up further. The heat of the tart as it cools will set that filling, and you sort of want it to be squidgy and rich anyway. You don't want it to be dry and fully baked through. You sort of want that sweet spot where it's kind of fudgy and pudding-like. You want the crust to be golden and baked, and it definitely is. But you want that frangipane filling to be nice and soft and fudgy and gooey. I'm just going to let this sit for about 25 minutes to cool partially, and then we'll take our knife, run it around the edges, and release the sides of the springform pan. But right now this is too hot to handle, so we'll just let this sit for a bit. Then we'll take the sides of the pan off, and maybe we'll even give it a little taste test then. I'll see you in a little bit. So our plum tart has been cooling for about 25 minutes, and now I'm just going to run a knife around the edge of the pan just to loosen any bits that have stuck to the sides of the springform pan. There's some sugary bits there that have stuck, so just take your time and go around until that's nice and loose. Now you can very carefully unbuckle this and see if we can lift it off. If there's a little spot that's stuck, like mine is here, just use your knife to help ease that off. And it looks very nice, and the nuts are nicely toasted, and I think the setting has set up just as I thought it would, but the moment of truth will be when we cut into this and we see how everything is. So I'm just going to transfer this to a nice platter, and then we'll cut into it and see what it's like. So I just took a moment to transfer this from the pan onto a nice platter, and I didn't film that, I'm sorry. And now we'll cut into this and see if we can make a nice slice and see how juicy and beautiful it is inside. So use a sharp knife. Lovely. I don't know if you can see in there, but the crust is nice and flaky and short, like a shortbread. And then you have that layer of frangipane and the juicy plum on top. And I think it's going to be just delicious. And now I've just cut a little wedge so we can have a taste. So beautiful. Yeah, the crust is just gorgeous, nice and golden and crispy. And then you have that sweet almond gooey layer of frangipane and the juicy plums and the little crunch of the toasted almonds on top. The only thing that would make this better would be maybe a scoop of ice cream or some loosely whipped cream on top. But I just wanted to taste it just as it is. It's really a lovely dessert and well worth the time it takes to pit all those plums. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you come across a beautiful basket of plums at the farmer's market this time of year, pick them up, give this recipe a whirl, and you won't be disappointed. Thanks so much for stopping by my kitchen. I love it that you're here, and I really appreciate the time you spend with me. Maybe I'll see you here next week. I promise I'll make you something delicious. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.